Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Abidemi. It's good to see you all today. Today, we'll be going through the topic poverty, inequality, and development. Poverty, inequality, and development. All right. Of course, you know that we have already, in one of our topics, last topics, we already talked about what poverty is. And that is if people cannot afford the basic necessities of life. And based on the World Bank definition, also, we could say extreme poverty occurs when people are living below $2.15 per day. Right? Poverty is when people cannot afford the basic necessities of life. And extreme poverty occurs based on the World Bank standard when people are living below $2.15 per day. Right? So let's dive straight to income inequality. Right? Income inequality is how income is unevenly distributed throughout a population. Or we can also say income inequality can also be defined as the disproportionate distribution of total national income, where certain households or individuals hold a larger share of income relative to others. What does that mean? This disparity can be influenced by various factors. Okay, that means that there are so many factors that can lead to income inequality in a country. There's such factors related to wages, access to education and resources, and government policies, which ultimately affect households' economic well being and opportunities for upward mobility. All right, so income inequality refers to income gap, okay, among people within a country. Income inequality could also be compared between countries, all right, within a country or between countries. And like I said, there's so many factors that are responsible for that. So, how best can we measure um, inequality? As economists, how do we measure inequality? So, we can measure inequality by this points I've listed here, okay? Size distributions, Lorentz curve, Gini coefficient, and functional distributions. So let's go through the first one, size distributions. It simply means with individual persons or households and the total incomes they receive. The way in which they receive that income is not considered. What matters is how much each earns, irrespective of whether the income is derived solely from employment or comes from other sources such as interest, profit, rents, gift, or inheritance. All right. So based on size distribution, we are looking at the total incomes received. All right, by individuals. All right. We are not categorizing whether they are farmers or they are doctors. We just want to look at the income that they receive. Okay. For example, look at here. It says also the locational, urban or rural, and occupational sources of income, e.g., agricultural, manufacturing, commerce, services, are ignored. If Miss X and Mr. Y both receive the same personal income, they are classified together, irrespective of the fact that Ms. S may work 15 hours a day as a doctor, while Mr. Y doesn't work at all, but simply collects interest on his inheritance. All right, so you see that. So basically, based on size distributions, we are taking a look at what individuals earn. All right, but we are not so concerned about whether they are doctors, whether they are maybe they get their money from being farmers uh, or being a teacher, right? So size distribution takes a look at the income of uh, individuals, but not necessarily looking at where that income is coming from. Okay, meaning that occupational sources of the income. Of course, you know this is within a legal job. All right, we're not talking about illegalities here. We are talking about when people earn legal income. Okay. Okay. So let's take a look at Lawrence curve. So Lawrence curve is one of the most popular ways of measuring um, inequality. The Lawrence curve, named after American economics Maxwell Lawrence, is a graphical representation of an economic inequality model. The curve takes the population percentile on the x-axis and cumulative wealth on the y-axis. When we take a look at the graph, we will see it now. Complementing this graph would be a diagonal line at a 45-degree angle from the origin, meeting point of the x and y axis, indicating the population's perfect income or wealth distribution. All right, we're going to see the graph. Below the straight diagonal line will be this actual distribution Lorentz curve, and the area enclosed between the line and this curve is the precise measurement of inequality. The area between the two lines expressed as a ratio to the area under the straight line is called Gini coefficient. Okay, developed by the Italian statistician Corrado Gini in 1912. So let's take a look at the curve, all right? So this is the Gini curve. So this straight line here, this red straight line, demonstrates equality. So income equality within a country. All right. So if you have this for a country, this straight line here, it means that income inequality is very minimal. All right. So the Lorentz curve is this curve that you have here. Okay. This curve that you have here. This is the Lorentz curve. This is income equality. All right. So the farther this Lorentz curve from this equality would let you know to the extent of income inequality in that country. All right. So if the Lorentz curve keeps pushing out like this, bowing out like this, for example, you have this, that tells you that there's higher income inequality. Keeps going out this way, this shows you there's there's high income inequality. Okay, so see, the greater of the degree of inequality, the greater the bend and closer to the horizontal axis. Hence, we can say that the Lorentz curve is the graphical method of studying dispersion. All right, so see, if you keep having the Lorentz curve, like I said, bow out, that shows you um, higher level of income inequality. But if the Lorentz curve is very close to the 45-degree line, then we can say that income inequality is very low or very minimal. Okay, so Lorentz curve is one of the ways whereby we measure income inequality. Okay, so the third way of measuring income inequality is also Gini coefficient. All right, so Gini coefficient is also known as Gini index and can be computed as follows. Let us assume in the graph area that A1 represents the Lorentz curve, okay, and the line, curve and the line, and A2 is the line below the curve. So how do we find the Gini coefficient? That will be this A1 divided by, okay, A1 plus A2. So Gini coefficient is the mathematical indicator. Okay, while Lorentz curve is the graphical explanation or um, graphical representation of inequality. All right, so Lorentz curve is the graphical method, while Gini coefficient, also known as the Gini index, is the mathematical indicator. So the Gini coefficient lies between 0 and 1. 0 being the distance where there is perfect equality. This is it right here. You see right here. So if you're having this, then that tells you that there is uh, perfect equality. But if this, like I said, if this keep bowing out, getting to this point, then that tells you the level of inequality. And won't be the instance where there is perfect inequality. Therefore, the higher the area enclosed between the two lines represents higher economic inequality. I already mentioned that. Right? Gini coefficient is among a class of measures that satisfy four highly desirable properties. Okay, there are um, four properties that are ascribed to the Gini coefficient. Okay, in measuring income inequality. Okay, so we have the anonymity principle, the scale independence principle, the population independence principle, and transfer principle. Let's take a look at the first one, the anonymity principle. This simply means that our measure of inequality should not depend on who has the higher income. Okay, why? This means that if two people switch their income levels, the overall inequality measure remains unchanged as long as the distribution of income is the same. So for Gini coefficient or for the Gini index, we are much concerned about the distribution of the income and not the people involved. Okay, we just want to know the distribution of that income. See, the overall inequality measure remains the same as long as the distribution of income is the same. The measure treats everyone equally, ensuring that no one's status or identity affects the assessment of inequality. What about the scale independence principle? The scale independence principle states that our measure of inequality should not be influenced by the overall size of the economy or the specific units used to measure income. In other words, changes in the overall level of income or wealth should not affect the way we assess inequality among individuals or households. All right, let's give examples. If everyone's income in a society doubles or halves, the relative differences in income between individuals remain the same. For instance, if person A earns $20,000 and person B earns $40,000 and both incomes double to $40,000 and $18,000 respectively, and the income gap, $20,000, remains unchanged, the Gini coefficient or any other measure of inequality would yield the same result because it focuses on how income is distributed, not on absolute amounts. Interesting. So we take a look at the population independence principle. This states that a measure of inequality should not be affected by the size of the population. In other words, whether a country has 1 million people or 100 million people, the inequality measure, like the Gini coefficient, should stay the same if, you see, if the income distribution pattern is identical. So the Gini coefficient or the Gini index, we are very, very much interested about the distribution of the income and not on the people involved, not on the size of the population, not on the size of the economy. All right. Imagine two countries A and B. In country A, three people can earn $10,000, $30,000, and $60,000. In country B, six people can earn $10,000, $10,000, $30,000, $30,000, and $60,000, and $60,000 and $60,000. Although country B has twice the population of country A, watch it again. The distribution pattern is the same. So very concerned about the distribution pattern. The Gini coefficient will be the same for both countries. The transfer principle, sometimes called the Bigot-Dalton principle, after its creators. It states that holding all other incomes constant, if we transfer some income from a richer person to a poorer person, but not so much that the poorer person is now richer than the original rich person, the resulting new income distribution is more equal, of course. So that we sometimes we can call that equitable income distribution, or that type of income distribution is being fair. You don't want a situation where you are trying to ensure that an economy develops or progresses, and you are redistributing income in such a way that the one who is rich is becoming poor, you don't want that kind of situation. But if income in distribution occurs whereby some amount of money is being moved to those who are kind of poor or inadequate within the society, that is fair. Not to the extent that the poor person now becomes richer than one who is originally rich due to uh, income redistribution. You don't want that. All right. You want a situation where income is redistributed in such a way that the person who is inadequate or doesn't have enough within the society's income is uplifted or standard of living is uplifted, while it's being fair to the person who is originally rich. Okay, so he doesn't feel discouraged from working. All right, so it doesn't kill or destroy his innovation. Okay, so yeah, so we've done Gini coefficient, and the fourth one is functional distribution. Functional distributions. The functional distribution of income refers to the amount of income paid to various individuals or households. A single individual may receive income from more than one factor of production or from one source. A man may get income by offering his labor service from renting his property, land or building, and from his holdings of company, shares, or government bonds. So, functional distribution is trying to say the sources of revenue, okay, that individuals can earn money from different sources. So that's what it means by the functional distribution of income, amount of money, income paid, amount of income paid to various individuals or households. So it says a single individual may receive income from more than one factor of production or from more than one source. Okay. Now let's take a look at Kuznets' inverted U hypothesis. Okay. Simon Kuznets suggested that in the early stages of economic growth, the distribution of income will tend to worsen. Right? For those uh, who write scientific articles or scientific papers or academic papers, one can still reinvestigate the relationship between economic growth and income inequality and see if the Kuznets inverted U hypothesis stands. Okay, so Simon Kuznets suggested that in the early stages of economic growth, the distribution of income would tend to worsen. Only at later stages will it improve. This observation came to be characterized by the inverted U Kuznets curve. Explanations as to why inequality might worsen during the early stages of economic growth before eventually improving are numerous. They almost always relate to the nature of structural change, right? In terms of not structural change, maybe we are taking a look at if the economy is moving from a subsistent agriculture um, um, economic level to a more industrial economic level, all right? So that simply means maybe a country's source of livelihood is basically focusing on agriculture, and now they are trying to move to uh, building industries. Right. So it says early growth may, in accordance with the Lewis model, be concentrated in the modern industrial sector, where employment is limited but wages and productivity are high. All right. As just noted, the Kuznets curve can be generated by a steady process of modern sector enlargement growth as a country developed from a traditional to a modern economy. Okay. Alternatively, returns to education may first rise as the emerging modern sector demands skills, and they may fall as the supply of educated workers increases and the supply of unskilled workers fall. All right. So, I mean, at the earlier stage of economic growth, for example, where an economy is trying to transit from a traditional or an economy that majorly focuses on agriculture, and there's nothing wrong with uh, focusing on agriculture. But I usually say that a country has to learn to be able to create or produce value added goods and services. All right. And so, in terms of agriculture, is the country having the latest form of technology? Um, has it created a policy that has strengthened its agricultural system? Right. A country that produces food for itself and the rest of the world originally should be rich. I mean, that's not the case, but originally that country should be rich. All right. So, but if a country is transiting from a traditional to a modern sector, a much more industrialized uh, kind of economy, initially, what happens is that, for example, when you have um, the technological shocks, initially that kind of you know, slows the economy, right? But as time goes on, people are more educated, more skills are demanded, and so those who were in the agriculture or those in the traditional sector becomes and now they become kind of educated, and so they can work in the modern sector, and so that contributes to economic advancement. Okay, so this Kuznets invited you hypothesis, the curve. All right. So let's take a look at poverty. Poverty means when people cannot afford the basic needs of life or when they have limited choices regarding the decisions that can improve their welfare. One bank pegs the international poverty line at $2.15 per person per day. That's based on 2017 purchasing power parity. So, how can we best measure poverty? Okay, so we have the Foster Great Torbek Index, we have the Poverty Gap Index, we have Squared Poverty Gap Index, P2, we have multi-dimensional poverty measurement. Let's go. So the FGT, which is the Foster Great Torbek Index, is a generalized poverty measure developed by Eric Torbek, Joel Greer, and James Foster. It measures the level of absolute poverty. It includes the head count index, it's PO, which measures the proportion of the population that is poor. Okay, so we take a look at the fraction of the people within the population that is poor. This is the most popular because it is easy to understand and measure, but it does not indicate how poor the poor are, the extent of their poverty. That's what it means. Two, the poverty gap index, which is P1, measures the extent to which individuals fall below the poverty line, the poverty gaps, as a proportion of the poverty line. The sum of these poverty gaps give the minimum cost of eliminating poverty. The measure does not give any special weight to the poorest among the poor, right? That might be a limitation to this type of uh, poverty index. Okay, the first one does not tell us to what extent are the poor for, how poor are they. The second one does not give any special weight to the poorest among the poor. Then the third one is squared poverty gap index or the poverty severity index P2. This has become a standard of income poverty measure used by the World Bank and other agencies. And it is used in empirical work or income poverty because of its sensitivity to the depth and severity of poverty. Mexico uses the P2 poverty measure to allocate funds for education, health, and welfare programs for the poor. Hopefully, they still use that. The multidimensional poverty index, now used in the Women Development Report, measures acute global poverty by beginning at the level of the person or household. It measures overlapping deprivations using a set of 10 indicators in 3 dimensions: health, okay, education, living standards, and summarizes the individual or household's poverty profile with a weighted deprivation score. If more than 3 or 10 indicators are below the relevant poverty cutoffs, they are identified as multidimensionally poor. Okay, so let's see. These are the indicators. So you have nutrition, child mortality, years of schooling, school attendance, cooking fuel, improved sanitation, safe drinking water, electricity, flooring, and assets. Okay, this green part is based on living standard. The yellow and the orange is education, and the health, and this nutrition and child mortality is health, and these are the three dimensions of poverty. So, how do we know if someone is poor? You take a look at access to within a country. Do they have access to quality health care, or they themselves as individuals? So one thing is the country, all right. Another thing is the individuals. Are they earning enough income to actually access basic healthcare services? Number two is another thing is what is the quality of education in such a country? And so the question is based on individuals, are they able to access quality education? And number three, what is the state of the economy in terms of the welfare of the people? And individually, what is the living standard of that individual? So, and that's based on the assets he has, maybe the house he lives, access to electricity. Does he have access to cooking fuel? Does he have improved sanitation, his environment? Does he have a safe drinking water? So why should we be concerned about inequality among those above the poverty line? There are three major answers to this question. First, first, extreme income inequality leads to economic inefficiency. This is partly because at any given average income, the higher the inequality is, the smaller the fraction of the population that qualifies for a loan or for a credit or the credit. And we know credit does build society. Okay, the businessman gets credit for his business, the individual gets personal loan to improve his welfare. And so, if inequality or if people earn migrant low income, there's no way they can have access to loan, which can improve their welfare. Okay. Indeed, one definition of relative poverty is the lack of collateral. When low income individuals, whether they are absolutely poor or not, cannot borrow money, they generally cannot adequately educate their children or start and expand their business. Moreover, with high inequality, the overall rate of savings in the economy tends to be lower because the highest rate of marginal savings is usually found among the middle classes. Although the rich may save a larger dollar amount, they typically save a smaller fraction of their income, and they almost always save a smaller fraction of their marginal income. Landlords, business leaders, politicians, and other rich elites are known to spend much of their incomes on imported luxury goods, gold, jewelry, expensive houses, and foreign travel, or to seek safe havens abroad for their savings in what is known as capital flight. The second reason is that extreme income disparities undermine social stability and solidarity. Also, high inequality strengthens the political power of the rich and hence their economic bargaining power. Usually, this power will be used to encourage outcomes favorable to themselves. High income inequality, facilitates, rent seeking, 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 facilitates including actions such as excessive lobbying, large political donations, bribery, and cronyism. When resources are allocated to such rent-seeking behaviors, they are diverted from productive purposes that will lead to faster growth. Even worse, high inequality makes poor institutions very difficult to improve because the few with money and power are likely to view themselves as worse off from socially efficient reform, and so they have the motive and the means to resist it. And finally, extreme inequality is generally viewed as unfair. The philosopher John Rawls proposed a thought experiment to help clarify why this is so. Suppose that before you were born into this world, you had a chance to select the overall level of inequality among the heads people, but not your own identity. That is, you might be born as Bill Gates, but you might be born as the most wretchedly poor person in rural Ethiopia with equal probability. Ross calls this uncertainty the veil of ignorance. Okay, so the question is, so lastly, the question is, facing this kind of risk, would you vote for an income distribution that was more equal or less equal than the one you see around? If the degree of equality had no effect on the level of income or rate of growth, most people would vote for nearly perfect equality. Of course, if everyone had the same income no matter what, there will be little incentive to work hard, gain skills, or innovate. As a result, most people vote for some inequality of income outcomes. So the extent that these correspond to incentives for hard work or to the extent that these correspond to incentives for hard work or innovation. All right. So, I mean, that tells you within any society, you will still have some elements of inequality with it. But you do not want a situation where the income inequality is so wide. Because if the income inequality is so wide, it has its implications. All right. We talked about it. It causes rent seeking. All right. It causes bribery. All right. So people would like to have their way in a society where people are poor. So they do a lot of um, bribing and ensuring that they get richer. So if you become the president, you don't want a situation where the poor people are getting poorer and the rich people are getting richer. There's nothing wrong with the rich getting richer. But as a society, as a leader, as a president, as a governor, or as a representative, you have to uplift those who are poor. Because the better people are generally within the society, the better the environment. You would have less crime. You would have uh, less illegal activities because people have a better standard of living. And then when things are hard for people within an economy, the general people, then they will make things hard. People will make things hard for themselves or make things hard for others. All right. So a leader wants to ensure that the income inequality gap is not so wide. Of course, you have elements of income inequality because you have those that are very innovative and they deserve to be rich based on the product or the services they have designed or created. And so, but within the society, you want to ensure that it is well balanced. I hope you'll be able to learn from um, this course. And share it with your students. If you have questions, feel free to write under the comment and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. All right. I'll see you in the next class. Bye and God bless.